thank you so much for watching, listening, joining this series. Really stoked about what we're doing for this series called Tapas with Jesus. Tapas, you know? And you're like, what do you mean by tapas? Well, here in America, oftentimes the way we do a meal, if you have dinner, you're gonna have like, you know, an entree, you might have a salad, some kind of vegetable, maybe a dessert. You have 3 or 4 main things and 3 or 4 like little flavors, main flavors. But when you think about tapas, T-A-P-A-S, I always get it mixed up, 2 P's, 1 P, something like that. But it's a Spanish meal, and it's made of small plates. Hong Kong has the same kind of idea called dim sum. And in essence, it's a meal made up of appetizers or small plates. And it's super fun because you have a wide variety of flavors, of textures, of experiences. So it's like a party in your mouth. Ooh, you get a little piece of that, a little piece of that, a little taste here. So you get a little savory, a little sweet, a little this, a little bitters, you know, a little pungent. And it's just fun, lots of fun because of all the diversity. And so you're like, how does that relate to this series with Jesus? Well, you know, I've been doing a series in our church called Table Talk, but I want us to think about what this could look like in little tiny pungent conversations with Jesus. Some of those pungent conversations can be very sweet. Some of those pungent conversations might have a little bit of tang, right? Like be a little tangy in your mouth. Some of them might, you know, lemon. Lemon makes things can be bitter, vinegar, but it can also be bright. And so thinking about tapas conversations with Jesus, I want us to look today at John chapter 8, and it's verses 1 through 11, because this is another one of those little bite conversations that is very, very, very pungent and powerful. And in this conversation, Jesus is in the temple and the religious leaders are all around him. It's in the morning time, Jesus is teaching. And the religious leaders bring in and throw in front of him a woman, and they tell Jesus she is caught in the act of adultery, and the law, Moses' law, says we should stone her, kill her for being sinful and being caught in sin. On a little side note, my question is, how come they didn't bring the man? That's a pungent question, right? Because they just brought her. And I find it interesting because here's some of the tang and the tweak on this. Because Jesus, when they throw that woman down in front of him, it says that Jesus stooped down. This is in verse 6. He stoops down and writes in the ground, writes on the dirt. And he doesn't say anything. So there's no conversation. There's a quietness in him. And then it says verse 7, they persisted in asking him. They kept asking him. They kept pushing him. And then he straightens up and he says, he who is without sin among you, let him be the first to throw a stone at her. He stoops down again, writes on the ground. And I appreciate that this is a very poignant moment, because what Jesus does in this tapas, little brief, pungent, pointed conversation is he not only addresses who she is, but the people who are accusing her. And I find it interesting. You know, it says it in Matthew, in the Sermon on the Mount, the measure in which you judge is the measure in which you will be judged. And these religious leaders came to Jesus from a very judgmental position, posture. And at the same time, Jesus swings it and says, yeah, and you are also guilty and with sin. So you're measuring out some judgment, and I'm going to measure it back to you, because none of you here are perfect. And I think that's very poignant for us to consider in our lives, because the world in which we live, people around us, there's lots of sin. Lots of people doing bad things, lots of people breaking the law, lots of people being anti-religion, anti-God. And sometimes if we're not careful, we get really cranky. We can get kind of angry and mean and vengeful, and we want to push back and, you know, God, get them. But at the same time, Jesus pushes that around and says, but wait a second, let's examine what's inside of us. Let's examine. And he says it. He says it in the Sermon on the Mount. You know, when you look at the speck in somebody else's eye, but ignore the beam in your own eye, you're kind of missing the whole point. And I think this is really powerful because there's not a single one of us that have not sinned and have not struggled with sin. And I would venture to say it's possible and maybe even likely that you and I might still from time to time struggle with sin. So when we get our undies wound up about somebody else, let's be careful that we don't look first at ourselves. Because Jesus responds, he responds to these religious leaders and says, if you're without sin, then feel free, throw the first stone. And this is the response. When they heard it, they began to go out one by one, beginning with the older ones, and Jesus was left alone with the woman. And Jesus addresses the woman. He addresses not only the religious leaders, but he also addresses the woman. And he says to her, woman, where are your accusers? Does no one condemn you? And she said, no one, Lord, no one. And he says, I don't condemn you either. Go and sin no more. This is a very short, brief, but powerful conversation with Jesus, tapas. And I think we can also have these kinds of conversations with Jesus, that Jesus can step into our lives and say, hey, look, I know you've done some wrong things, and I can help you. I can help you to stop, and I'm not condemning you. I'm not accusing you. I'm not, shuffling you off to be destroyed and put in timeout. I'm going to have a conversation with you, an honest, raw conversation in the midst of all of your pain, anguish, and failures. And it's okay. We can talk, and I'm going to restore you. I'm going to help you so that you can come out of that and give you power so you don't have to keep going back and doing the same thing. So I love these tapas conversations with Jesus. I think they're super powerful, and thank you for watching. Hit the little notification bell right there. Thank you for subscribing. That'll be really helpful. And here's something I would ask you to answer in the little comments here. What is your favorite food? Right? What's your favorite food? If you had to choose any one thing, what would be your favorite food? I think that's a nice, easy question to answer, maybe, hopefully. So, and as we finish, of course, we have this fantastic joke, right? So, what do you call an alligator with a law degree? An alligator with a law degree, you call that person a litigator. Alligator, litigator. It's fantastic. Next week will be amazing. Thanks again for watching and listening.